Today is day 204. Persistence is the new perfection. So, when I was a young man, it was all the rage to be perfect. To be perfect at everything. Have the perfect job, the perfect car, perfect schedule, the perfect fitness routine, the perfect wife. You know, I always wanted to be perfect at everything. So, I had to create perfection. Now, I'm slightly joking about my wife, just in case she listens, to avoid any ramifications. So she was perfect. That's the one thing I got right. But I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the point is that I've spent my life chasing the ideal or the perfect attainment of something. In some case, I wouldn't want to start something until I had the perfect system. So I would not want to start I would not want to start working out until I had the perfect workout routine. Or I would not want to start eating good until I had the perfect diet plan. You fill in the blanks. Did not want to start investing until I perfectly had a good investment strategy. Now that I'm older and I'm looking back at the havoc strewn in my life on all my many failed attempts at perfection, I can see what was actually successful in my life and what has not been successful. And without exception, the thing that's the most successful in my life have been the things that I've been persistent on, perfection aside. So as I've been persistent and pursued something over the course of many, many years, those are the things that I've actually had success on. So I might even say this, that given enough time, persistence would lead to perfection. So as you go through the process of working on something, you work out all the kinks, and then it becomes closer and closer to perfect. In fact, I dare say, without sounding too blasphemous, that perhaps God, or the universal supreme being, is not necessarily in a perfect state, but rather perfectly progressing. Meaning that God has figured out this process of persistent. Perhaps God is the most persistent of all life. Because you got to think about it, there's one characteristic that all life has in common, and that is dogged persistence. Life will try to survive in the most harshest climates and the most unlikely of circumstances. Life will attempt to stay alive, to grow, to propagate. So maybe we humans are trying to create this perfect ideal of what we think God is as the static resting point. But maybe in reality, that's not true at all. Maybe God is the perfect representation of organic life. I don't know. I don't think it matters much. What matters, though, is perfection a state of being? Is perfection a state? I would say that our view of perfection as a static, stationary reality is not true, when in reality the process is more important than actually an outcome. So perfection is not achievable. It's not an achievable state you can get to, because organic life is always changing. But maybe it's rather perfect is the process that you pursue. It's the continuous process on which you embark. And isn't this organic life in a summary? I mean, just think about, if you look at any particular life form, it's imperfect in a myriad of ways. But if you look at the entirety of life, it seems rather perfect. I mean, life is so self-sustaining and symbiotic, and it's amazing how it adapts to its environment with such agility. You got to think that life itself is a perfect creation, even though the individual components may be less than perfect. In fact, perhaps that's its beauty, because if it were to try to be perfect, it would ultimately fail. Life succeeds because it allows for imperfection. So it's basically perfect in its imperfection. So humans can never be perfect at some end state. I think I've been chasing this perfection thing my whole life. And I don't think you can ever get close to it. We're always evolving, growing, improving, dying, being born, whatever, getting sick, getting better. We're always progressing. And although we will never achieve this idealistic state of perfection, we do have a superpower, and that superpower is our ability to be persistent. That's one thing you can say about life. It is persistent. I've been backpacking in the most rugged terrain, and I will get to what I think is the most desolate environment, and there will be a flower grow. No matter what we try to do, there will always be life trying to break through the cracks and crannies of our world. So, persistence works out the problems, issues, and efficiencies over time. It's like the great river rolling down a canyon. It smooths out all the sharp edges over time. All the boulders and rocks eventually get pounded to dust. Because just like life, persistence is actually progress. It's forward momentum at all times. So perfection is who you are by being persistent. Instead of creating the perfect starting point to get started, we should start now and strive through all the difficulties, challenges, and setbacks with persistence. I was talking to somebody a few days ago about getting married, and this person told me they didn't know if they wanted to get married to their current girlfriend because they didn't know if the girlfriend was, quote unquote, the one. This struck me as interesting because they were literally saying that they were looking for the perfect girl. Like they were not going to get married until they found the perfect woman. So the woman that they were currently dating and living with actually was not perfect enough for them to make this decision to get married to them. They weren't sure if they were the one. And that got me to thinking about this a lot, because when I got married to my wife, I'm really glad that she wasn't looking for the perfect husband, because she would have looked past me quick. I would have not been on the list. So luckily for me, she wasn't looking for the perfect husband. And I honestly wasn't looking for the perfect wife either. I don't even know what I was looking for. Reality is we met, we fell in love, and we liked what the hope of what each other could be. And we married that idea of who we could be together. So if you think about it, you never are going to find the perfect woman or the perfect mate. That's never going to happen. It's the idea that you can become, and in fact, you will not find the perfect person for you, right? Because you're never going to find a woman or a man that will fit you perfectly. That's not going to happen. However, over time, over many, many years of marriage, you will eventually work out all the kinks and problems, and then you'll be perfect for each other. I remember my grandmother and grandfather, who had been married almost 70 years, and even my parents, who've been married over 50 years. They have had their problems, believe me. And my wife and I, who've been married, well over 25 years, also have had our problems. But it's not, we have worked those problems out over time. And as we've done so, we've become more and more perfect for each other. We know each other's weaknesses. We know each other's strengths. And so despite the hard times, our persistence to the commitment has ended up creating this perfectly imperfect relationship. Persistence is what paid off, and not starting with perfection. So although this young man probably wouldn't want to hear me say it, you shouldn't be looking for the perfect wife, because that poor woman does not exist. Rather, you should be looking for someone that you want to spend the rest of your life trying to be persistent with. Somebody you think is that you admire enough, or you hold with a great enough esteem to put forth that hard effort and be persistent with. So any human relationship, any human endeavor can be measured in incremental progress. The only way to pursue that is through persistence. We will never reach perfection, and we will certainly not start out perfect. The concept of starting with the ideal is simply naivety of youth. It was stupidity on my part to think that I could create the perfect anything without having the time energy and strain to go through learning what it takes to be perfect. So I'm now, as I'm older, reteaching myself how to live. So I'm pursuing things rather than pontificating on them, and I'm being persistent rather than perfect.